History remembers Josiah Henson as a symbol of patience, faith, and quiet suffering. Schoolbooks paint him as a man who endured cruelty without bitterness, a gentle soul who bore chains with grace. But history often softens what it cannot bear to face. What if the truth is darker? What if the real Josiah Henson lived with a secret so heavy it poisoned his dreams and followed him into old age? This is not the story of a saint carved from marble. This is the story of a man made of flesh, fear, love, and unbearable choices. A man forced to survive inside a system that demanded not only his labor, but his conscience. Before the legend, before the myth, there was a child born into terror. And that is where our story truly begins. Part 1. The year was 1789. For some, it was a time of new beginnings and revolutionary hope. For others, it was only another sunrise under the shadow of chains. In Charles County, Maryland, on land thick with tobacco and soaked in sweat, a boy named Josiah was born into slavery on the plantation of Francis Newman. Josiah's first memories were not of comfort. They were sharp and violent, burned into his mind before he could understand their meaning. He remembered screams ripping through the air like thunder. He remembered the smell of blood mixing with damp earth. He remembered fear living in every breath. His father was a strong man, proud and protective. One day, when a white overseer attacked Josiah's mother, Millie, his father stepped forward. He defended her. For that single act of courage, he paid a terrible price. His ear was cut off as punishment, blood pouring down his neck as he was forced to kneel. Josiah watched. That image never left him. Soon after, his father was sold south. No goodbye, no explanation. One day he was there. The next, he was gone forever. Josiah learned early that love could be taken without warning. Millie never recovered. She moved through life like a shadow, her eyes filled with a deep and endless sorrow. Yet she taught Josiah how to survive. She taught him which plants could heal, how to read the weather, and when to stay silent. Silence, she told him, could save your life. The Newman plantation was a world ruled by violence. The whip spoke louder than words. Men and women were treated as tools, counted like animals, traded like coins. Children learned fear before they learned joy. As Josiah grew, he grew strong. Taller than most. Broader. His body hardened by labor, his mind sharpened by observation. He noticed patterns. He listened. He remembered everything. A rare gift, and a dangerous one. When Francis Newman's daughter married Isaac Riley, Josiah was transferred to Riley's land. Riley was unstable, drowning in debt, angry at the world. But he saw something useful in Josiah. Intelligence, discipline, control. Josiah could read a little, a secret taught by a white boy from a nearby farm. He understood crops. He understood people. Riley decided to use him. Josiah was made overseer over the other enslaved people. It was a promotion that felt like a curse. He was given better food, better clothes, a small cabin for his wife Charlotte and their children. He was spared the worst labor. But he was also given authority. And with authority came the whip. Josiah now stood between the master and the enslaved. Between cruelty and survival. Between obedience and betrayal. Some people trusted him. They believed he would protect them. Others hated him. They saw him as a traitor who had climbed by stepping on their backs. Josiah heard the whispers. He felt the stares. Every day he walked through fire. He learned quickly that refusal meant death. Not only for him, but for Charlotte. For his children. Riley had made that clear without saying it aloud. So Josiah learned to perform. When punishment was demanded, he delivered it carefully. Hard enough to satisfy Riley. Gentle enough to avoid lasting harm. Each strike tore at his soul. At night, he lay awake listening to his children breathe, wondering how many pieces of himself he had lost that day. Then came the summer of 1818. The crops failed. Riley's debts grew worse. The plantation became tense, heavy with fear. Everyone knew what happened when money ran short. Families were sold. Children disappeared. A young man named Daniel decided he could not wait for fate. He had a wife, Esther, and a newborn son. One night, he ran. He did not get far. Daniel and 2 others were captured and beaten. Riley was furious. He wanted blood. He summoned Josiah. He ordered Josiah to bring the men back and punish them publicly. Josiah felt the world tilt. Daniel was brave, defiant. He had questioned Josiah before, asking how he could serve the master. That question now echoed in Josiah's mind. Josiah rode out with the whip in his hand, its weight unbearable. When he arrived, Daniel stood bound, bruised but unbroken. Esther stood nearby holding her baby, tears streaming down her face. Josiah raised the whip. In that moment, every choice he had ever made closed in on him. If he refused, Riley would destroy his family. If he went too easy, Riley would punish them all. If he obeyed, he would become the monster he feared. He struck, not with rage, with calculation, each blow measured, each strike cutting deeper into his conscience than into Daniel's skin. Daniel did not scream, he only looked at Josiah. That look followed Josiah long after the blood dried. That night, something inside Josiah broke. He had survived, his family was safe, but the price was his peace. And this was only the beginning. Engaging hook, the whip never left Josiah Henson's hand. Even when it was gone, he could still feel it. In the dead of night, when the plantation fell silent and the world seemed to hold its breath, the past returned with merciless clarity. Every choice he had made, every blow he had delivered, every soul that had looked at him with betrayal in their eyes. This is the part of his story history does not like to tell. The part where survival begins to feel worse than death. And where one decision will drag him deeper into a nightmare with no clear escape. Part 2. Sleep became an enemy. Josiah would lie beside Charlotte, staring into the darkness as memories crept back uninvited. He heard the crack of the whip. He saw Daniel's back flinch. He felt the weight of judgment pressing down on his chest. Often he woke drenched in sweat, his hands clenched as if still holding the leather handle. The nights were the worst. Silence gave guilt too much room to breathe. By day, he tried to bury the past beneath work. He walked the fields, inspected the crops, counted tools, organized labor. He moved with authority, spoke with calm control, but inside he was unraveling. The poison of guilt did not strike all at once. It worked slowly, quietly, eating away at who he believed himself to be. The people around him felt the change. Old Martha, who had lived through more seasons than she could count, no longer met his eyes. When Josiah passed, she turned her head, as if he were already a ghost. Her silence carried more judgment than anger ever could. The younger men watched him closely. Some showed open resentment, others showed something worse, understanding. They knew the trap he lived in, yet they could not forgive him for surviving inside it. Josiah overheard whispers that stopped when he approached. "He's the master's man now. He would whip his own blood if ordered." Those words followed him everywhere. He felt them in the space between him and the people he was meant to protect. He belonged nowhere, not with the enslaved, not with the master. He stood alone on a narrow bridge, with fire on both sides. Isaac Riley, however, was pleased. The punishment of Daniel had convinced him of Josiah's loyalty. Riley praised him openly, clapping him on the shoulder, calling him valuable. Each compliment tightened the chains around Josiah's conscience. Riley trusted him with more. Crop planning, livestock care, market trips, even money. Josiah became essential to the plantation's survival. And the more essential he became, the harder it was to imagine escape. His life had become a golden cage. Comfortable on the surface, unbreakable underneath. Only one place offered relief. His cabin. Charlotte. She never questioned him, never accused him, but she saw the pain in his eyes. She felt the tension in his body when he came home late. Her quiet presence both comforted and condemned him. She knew he carried a burden meant to protect their children. And that knowledge made it heavier. Their children were his anchor. Tom, Peter, Isaac, Rebecca, Mary, Sarah. Their laughter cut through his darkness. Their small hands in his reminded him why he endured. At night, he watched them sleep, memorizing their faces, terrified of a future where they might be taken from him. He promised himself he would do anything to keep them safe. That promise became his weakness. The economy of slavery left no room for mercy. Tobacco exhausted the land. Prices rose and fell without warning. Maryland planters struggled, And when money ran out, enslaved people became currency. Josiah saw the ledgers. He heard Riley's anxious conversations. He knew the truth. One bad year meant families destroyed. Sold south. Gone forever. The fear of the Deep South haunted every cabin. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. Names spoken in whispers, places where hope died quickly. Then came 1825. The air felt different, heavy, charged. Riley's debts had grown unbearable. Creditors pressed harder. The land yielded less. Josiah knew something terrible was coming. One hot afternoon, Riley called him to the main house. The master's face was pale. His smile forced. "Henson," he said, "I have made a great decision." Josiah's stomach tightened. "Maryland is finished," Riley continued. "Worn soil, poor markets. But Kentucky, that is the future. Fertile land, fresh start." Josiah listened in silence. Riley spoke of opportunity, of prosperity, of unity. He promised better conditions, enough food, no family separations. "We will move everyone," Riley said proudly. "Build a new life together." Josiah knew better than to believe promises spoken by desperate men. Then Riley delivered the final blow. "Henson, you will lead them. You will organize the journey. Keep order. Ensure we arrive intact." Josiah felt the weight settle on his chest. He was not just an overseer anymore. He was being made responsible for delivering human lives across hundreds of miles. Men, women, children, his people. If he refused, everything he loved would be destroyed. If he obeyed, he would become something he barely recognized. As Riley smiled, dreaming of profit and renewal, Josiah realized the truth. The road to Kentucky would be paved with suffering. And once they started walking, there would be no turning back. Engaging hook. What does it mean to be a leader when every choice you make can destroy the people you are sworn to protect? Josiah Henson, long remembered as a figure of quiet endurance, faced a journey that would test not only his courage but the very limits of his conscience. The path ahead promised hope to those who followed, yet hid a deadly betrayal, a secret that threatened to consume him. This is the true story of Josiah Henson, a man trapped between duty, survival, and the unbearable weight of truth. Part 3. "And you, Henson," Riley had said, his eyes glinting with manipulative trust, "you will lead them. You are my most trusted man, my superintendent. You will take the entire company, men, women, children, livestock, on the journey to Kentucky. I will follow later once I have settled my affairs here. The fate of all of them rests in your capable hands." Josiah had felt a momentary surge of pride. To be entrusted with such responsibility, to guide people toward a promised better life, felt like an honor. Yet the cheerfulness in Riley's voice grated against him. His instincts screamed caution. Too many promises had turned to dust before they could be believed. That night, sleep was impossible. Josiah paced the cabin, listening to the faint snores of his children, the soft, steady breathing of Charlotte beside him. The weight of the coming journey pressed down, a crushing presence. He thought of the fragile hope he had seen in the eyes of the others. Their trust in him, their belief that he could safely lead them to a new beginning, clashed violently with his own suspicions. The opportunity for truth came sooner than expected. In Riley's careless rush to prepare for departure, his office had been left unguarded. Piles of papers, usually hidden and locked away, sat exposed under the dim light of the afternoon. Josiah's heart raced as he slipped into the main house, careful to leave no trace of his intrusion. The documents were a window into the master's mind, bills of sale, promissory notes, letters. And then Josiah's eyes fell on a letter addressed to a Mr. Marks in Daviess County, Kentucky. His hands trembled as he read. Riley's words painted a picture of calculated cruelty. Kentucky was not a land of new beginnings. It was a temporary holding ground. Once there, the enslaved, including families, would be sold to the highest bidder in the markets of the Deep South. The promise of keeping families together was a lie, a mask hiding the true intention, profit above humanity. Josiah staggered back from the desk, the paper quivering in his hands. He felt as though the floor had dropped beneath him. He was not a leader guiding his people to safety, he was a shepherd delivering them to wolves. The horror of the betrayal hit him like a physical blow, his stomach turning, his mind spinning. He thought of Charlotte and the children. If he acted rashly, they could be sold first, punished first. If he fled alone, leaving others behind, he would live with the shame and guilt for the rest of his life. And yet, he could not allow the deception to continue. The truth gnawed at him, demanding action, though the path was invisible in the darkness. The days before departure were tense and fevered. Josiah moved with careful efficiency, maintaining the illusion of hope for the others. He offered reassurances with a steady voice, spoke with calm authority, and organized the wagons and livestock as though this journey were a triumph rather than a trap. Inside, however, his mind was a storm of plotting and dread. When the caravan finally began its journey in late autumn, the air was sharp, filled with the scent of decaying leaves and cold smoke from distant hearths. Josiah rode at the front, a steady presence among the fearful, weary travelers. Men and women, children clutching small bundles, shuffled alongside wagons that groaned under their modest possessions. Hope flickered in their eyes, fragile yet stubborn, and Josiah's heart ached with the knowledge of the lie behind every word he spoke. Each day was a battle against both the terrain and his conscience. The Allegheny Mountains loomed ahead, their slopes steep, covered in the fiery reds and oranges of fall. He urged the weary onward with firm, encouraging words, masking the terror coiling in his chest. Every step of the horses, every creak of wagon wheels, was a reminder that he held the fate of dozens in his hands. Food was scarce. Cornmeal and salted pork became the meager diet for the journey, cooked over open fires that belched smoke into the cold, early morning air. Nights were the worst. Huddled together under the indifferent sweep of stars, the travelers whispered quietly about Kentucky, imagining a new life. Their dreams were built on the same promises Josiah knew to be hollow. He watched them sleep, small bodies pressed together for warmth. Their trust weighed on him like chains. He had disciplined them, protected them, led them. And now, he would be their guide toward betrayal if he did nothing. The moral torment gnawed at him constantly. As the journey stretched on, the distance between Maryland and Kentucky grew, but the distance from hope grew faster. Every mile added weight to Josiah's conscience. Each morning, he would rise before the sun, checking wagons, arranging camp, rationing food. Every evening, he would walk among the sleepers, pretending the road was a path to safety, all while wrestling with a truth he could scarcely bear. And then there were the whispers. Other travelers noticed subtle cues. Josiah's eyes, always scanning, calculating. His silence, heavy and deliberate. He saw the questions forming in their minds, the quiet fear that their guide might not be the protector they hoped. He could not let suspicion grow, could not allow despair to fester. Yet every smile, every word of reassurance, felt like a dagger in his own heart. Josiah knew that to survive and protect what he loved, he had to play the role of loyal overseer flawlessly. But at night, when the fire burned low and shadows stretched across the wagons, the full horror of his responsibility settled in. He had to keep moving. He had to keep hope alive in the faces around him, even though he knew the truth. And all the while, he plotted, desperate for a way to save as many as he could, even in the teeth of deception. The journey had begun. Each day brought new challenges. Rough terrain, unpredictable weather, the physical strain on bodies already weakened by years of oppression. Yet Josiah's greatest challenge was not the mountains, the rivers, or the cold. It was the knowledge of betrayal, the secret he carried, heavier than any bundle, heavier than any load the wagons bore. And so, the line of wagons and people snaked across the landscape, a fragile thread of hope and fear. Josiah led, not as a liberator, but as a man walking a razor's edge, balancing survival and conscience, courage and deception. The Kentucky horizon promised new beginnings, but for Josiah Henson, the shadows of Maryland traveled with him, whispering of betrayal, torment, and the impossible choices still to come. The road stretched endlessly, and Josiah understood, the real journey had only just begun. Engaging hook. How far would you go to protect your family when every choice you make could destroy everyone you care about? Josiah Henson, a man celebrated in history for endurance, now walks a path darker than any story remembers. Leading his people under the guise of hope, He carries a secret so devastating it could shatter lives. The journey is long, the stakes are deadly, and every decision is a test of conscience, courage, and survival. Part 4. The days on the road to Kentucky were long and grueling. The cold bit through their worn clothing, and the nights seemed to stretch into eternity. Josiah watched as children clutched their mothers, trembling in the chill. Adults, hardened by years of labor, moved with fatigue in every muscle, yet the faint spark of hope in their eyes kept them moving. They believed in the promise of a new life, unaware of the darkness Josiah carried in his heart. The mountains loomed ahead, imposing and unyielding. The Alleghenies tested both man and beast. Wagons groaned under the weight of their limited belongings. Livestock struggled against the uneven terrain, and every step forward required a meticulous calculation from Josiah. He could not afford delays. He could not afford mistakes. Every obstacle became a battle against time, weather, and his own rising panic. At night, by the dim glow of the fire, Josiah walked among the people, offering words of encouragement, telling them that relief was just over the next hill, that Kentucky promised safety. He spoke with conviction, though every syllable tore at his soul. Inside, he knew that Kentucky was not a haven but a trap. Riley's deceit was a shadow stretching across every mile, and he could feel its chill pressing against him with every heartbeat. Charlotte noticed his restlessness. One night, she touched his arm gently as he stood near the fire, staring into the darkness. "Josiah, you must rest," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "They need your strength, and so do we." He nodded but did not move. "I cannot rest, Charlotte. Not while they walk in hope that is a lie." His voice was a whisper, as if the darkness itself might overhear him. She did not respond but squeezed his hand, a silent understanding passing between them. The older men in the group began to notice something in Josiah, a tension beneath the surface, a strain in his eyes. Some whispered to one another, wondering if their guide carried a heavier burden than even they could imagine. Yet none dared question him directly. He was their leader, their protector, the only one who seemed capable of keeping the caravan moving through the treacherous terrain. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast the mountains in a fiery glow, Josiah called the group together. He spoke of perseverance, of endurance, of faith that the land ahead would reward their struggles. His words were meant to inspire, but in truth, they were a mask for the storm raging within him. The lie was heavier with every smile he forced, every promise he repeated. As the caravan progressed, the weather turned harsh. Rain fell in sheets, turning paths into mud and slowing the wagons to a crawl. Livestock faltered, and Josiah spent long hours encouraging both animals and humans alike, lifting spirits where he could, guiding the tired through the slippery trails. Every word of reassurance felt like a dagger, a reminder that the hope he cultivated was built on deception. Tensions began to rise within the group. Hunger gnawed at them, and fatigue twisted tempers into sharp edges. Arguments flared over rations, over who would carry heavier loads, over the pace Josiah set. Each confrontation brought a flash of fear to Josiah's mind. One wrong word, one misstep, and chaos could erupt. Chaos would draw attention. Attention could reveal the truth. And the truth would bring death, despair, and the shattering of families. He found solace only in the brief moments with Charlotte. Together, they whispered plans in the dead of night, imagining ways to protect their children and as many others as possible. Every decision was a balancing act between what Riley demanded and what his conscience demanded. Escape seemed impossible. Confrontation was too dangerous. The path forward had to be walked carefully, step by step, lie by lie, until he could find a chance to turn the journey into salvation rather than slaughter. The cold winter nights brought new dangers. Fires had to be kept alive for warmth, but smoke attracted predators and prying eyes. The roads were isolated, the forests dense and dark, filled with unknown threats. Josiah's awareness of every sound heightened, every rustle in the trees or snap of a branch causing his heart to race. Each night, he made the rounds, checking on the people, ensuring the wagons were secure, that no one wandered too far, that no one succumbed to despair. Children asked questions, their voices innocent and curious. "How much farther? Will we really have a home there?" Josiah answered with calm certainty, though the lie was bitter on his tongue. Each word was a thread in a delicate web he had to maintain, one misstep and the whole facade could unravel. He longed to tell them the truth, but the thought of shattering their fragile hope, the fear of Riley's wrath, and the looming possibility of families being torn apart kept his silence. By the time they crossed into the rolling hills of western Maryland, the first signs of Kentucky's fertile land appeared on the horizon. The sight was both uplifting and terrifying. Josiah's heart wrenched as he imagined the fate awaiting those who trusted him completely. Every mile forward brought them closer to both promise and doom, and the duality weighed heavily on him. One particularly cold night, as frost settled over the camp, Josiah sat alone beside the dwindling fire. The faces of those he led swam before him: Daniel, Esther, Caleb, Samuel, all whose lives he had once disciplined to preserve them, now walking unknowingly toward potential destruction. He felt the sting of each lash he had delivered in the past, the silent accusations he had carried since, and now the unbearable knowledge of Riley's plan compounded his torment. He whispered prayers under his breath, asking for guidance, for a chance to save as many as he could. Each day he plodded silently, searching for a path to defiance that would not lead to immediate catastrophe. He knew the journey to Kentucky was more than miles of land, it was a test of cunning, endurance, and courage beyond anything he had faced. The caravan moved forward, shrouded in the quiet horror of a hope built on lies. Josiah's leadership kept them alive, but it did not keep their future safe. With each sunrise, the weight of the secret grew heavier. And with each nightfall, he wondered if he could survive the moral crucible that awaited at the end of the trail. The path ahead was uncertain. The promises of Kentucky were empty, the dangers real. Josiah Henson, the man who had endured unimaginable cruelty, now faced the ultimate trial: to protect his people, keep his family safe, and navigate a treacherous road paved with deception, all while maintaining the fragile illusion of hope. This journey, once imagined as a passage to a new beginning, had become a horror of impossible choices. And Josiah knew, deep in his soul, that the true test had only just begun. Engaging hook. What does it take to carry the weight of 100 lives on your shoulders, knowing that every step forward could bring them closer to unimaginable suffering? Josiah Henson, remembered as a figure of courage and endurance, now faces a journey where hope and horror intertwine. The road to Kentucky is long, the stakes are deadly, and every choice is a battle between conscience and survival. Part 5. The journey stretched on, longer and harsher than anyone had imagined. The initial excitement of departure had faded into the cold, biting reality of travel under relentless uncertainty. Every morning, Josiah awoke before dawn, his body aching, his mind alert to every sound, every movement. He would check on the wagons, coax the weary livestock, and rouse the people with calm, steady words. His voice, firm yet gentle, became the fragile thread holding the caravan together. The children were the hardest to bear. Their small hands clung to their mothers. Their voices filled with questions about home, about safety, about the life promised by Riley. Josiah answered with conviction, though inside he trembled. Every word was a careful construction, a lie wrapped in hope, designed to maintain faith and prevent panic. He had learned to speak with authority while hiding the storm raging within him. The terrain became increasingly treacherous. Winter crept in with icy winds, freezing mud, and snow that slowed the wagons to a crawl. Mountains rose steep and unforgiving, their slopes slick and dangerous. Josiah guided every step, knowing a miscalculation could mean injury, death, or exposure. Every frozen morning, he would urge the people to keep moving, to press onward despite the pain, the exhaustion, the gnawing hunger. The adults bore their burdens with quiet resilience, though tension simmered beneath the surface. Disagreements flared over rations, rest, and the pace set by Josiah. The moral weight he carried made every decision agonizing. Push too hard, and someone might collapse or break. Move too slowly, and the promise of Kentucky would slip farther away. Each choice was a perilous balancing act. Josiah's nights were sleepless. After the fire died down and the caravan settled into whatever shelter they could find, he walked among the sleeping, listening to their soft breathing, their whispered prayers. His heart ached as he imagined the cruel fate that awaited them if Riley's plan succeeded. The knowledge of betrayal burned inside him, a constant reminder of the stakes. Charlotte remained his anchor. Her presence, her quiet strength, reminded him of why he endured, why he continued despite the growing weight of despair. When he found a moment to speak with her in private, they plotted in whispers, weighing every risk. They spoke of escape, of diversion, of ways to save as many as they could without drawing Riley's suspicion. Every plan seemed dangerous, yet inaction was unbearable. One evening, the wind howled through the mountains, carrying the scent of frost and pine. Josiah noticed a young boy, no more than 10, shivering violently, too weak to move. The boy's mother held him close, fear etched across her face. Josiah knew that stopping for too long would delay the caravan, but leaving the child behind was unthinkable. He took a deep breath and knelt beside the boy, wrapping his cloak around him, whispering words of encouragement. Slowly, the boy gained strength, bolstered by Josiah's care and the mother's unwavering support. The psychological toll of leadership was relentless. Men and women began to cast furtive glances at him, sensing the weight he bore, sensing perhaps a hint of doubt behind his calm exterior. Some whispered among themselves, asking questions they dared not voice aloud. Are we truly safe? Is Henson truly guiding us, or is he merely leading us toward another cruel fate? Josiah sensed the tension, but he knew any crack in his demeanor could unravel their fragile trust. Every day, he watched the terrain, looking for paths less traveled, for ways to shield the group from potential danger. Bandits, wild animals, and the harsh elements were constant threats. Each decision required calculation, courage, and cunning. He led with precision, yet inside he fought a war against despair. The knowledge of Riley's true intentions was a shadow he could not escape, a poison in every breath he took. The cold winter nights were the worst. Around the campfires, whispers of home, of family, of dreams, floated into the darkness. Children asked about schools, about their new homes, about the food they would eat. Josiah answered with carefully measured words, weaving hope from lies, trying to keep the fragile flame of belief alive. Each lie was a blade twisting in his chest, a reminder of the betrayal he could not yet avert. Food was scarce. Cornmeal and salted pork were rationed carefully, shared among the weak and hungry. Josiah oversaw every distribution, ensuring fairness while hiding his own growing fear. Hunger made tempers short, arguments occasionally erupted, but Josiah's presence and steady guidance prevented escalation. He had to maintain order, even as his heart cracked under the weight of knowing the ultimate deception. One night, as snow fell quietly around the camp, Josiah found himself alone with Charlotte. They sat huddled together, whispering urgent plans. "We cannot let Riley separate families," Charlotte said, her voice trembling. "We have to find a way to protect as many as possible." Josiah nodded, the cold fear gripping his heart. He knew the risk. Every attempt to resist could mean death for some, perhaps all. Yet he also knew he could not stand by and allow families to be torn apart. The days dragged on, each mile a test of endurance and willpower. Josiah's careful strategies kept the group moving, kept them alive, and kept the spark of hope flickering. But the road ahead was uncertain. The mountains were behind them, yet the fertile lands of Kentucky promised danger instead of freedom. Every step forward was a delicate dance between concealment, courage, and moral survival. By the time the first signs of Kentucky's rolling hills appeared on the horizon, Josiah felt the dual weight of relief and terror. Relief that the treacherous mountains were behind them. Terror that what awaited in Kentucky was unknown, and could be far worse than anything they had yet endured. He rode at the front of the caravan, scanning the horizon, every sense alert, every nerve stretched taut. Josiah Henson, the man who had endured more than most could imagine, now faced the greatest challenge of his life. The lives of dozens, the futures of families, rested on his choices, on his courage, on his ability to navigate a treacherous path of lies, deception, and moral compromise. The journey was far from over. The promise of Kentucky was a fragile veneer, hiding the darkness that could consume them all. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across the cold, open fields, Josiah realized the truth of his own predicament. The road to freedom, if it even existed, would demand every ounce of cunning, every moment of courage, and every piece of his soul. The real horror was not the miles traveled, but the choices still to come, choices that would define him, and the lives of those who followed him, forever. Engaging hook. How far would a man go to protect the people he loves when every choice could destroy them? Josiah Henson, a figure remembered for courage and endurance, now faces the darkest hour of his life. The journey to Kentucky has tested body, mind, and spirit, but the real challenge is the moral storm raging within him. The path ahead will demand courage, cunning, and sacrifice beyond anything he has yet faced. Part 6. The final stretch to Kentucky unfolded under a sky heavy with gray clouds, the chill of late winter creeping into every bone. Josiah rode at the front, his eyes scanning the horizon, his ears alert to every sound. Behind him, the caravan moved with weary determination. Children clung to their mothers, their faces pale from cold and fatigue. Adults trudged along, exhausted yet holding on to the fragile hope that had carried them this far. Josiah's heart was a battleground. Each day brought him closer to the land that Riley had promised as a new beginning, yet every mile also brought him closer to the cruel truth he had uncovered. The letter he had read weeks earlier burned in his mind like an unhealed wound. Kentucky was not a sanctuary, it was a staging ground for betrayal. For the ultimate sale of families like his own. He had tried to plan, to strategize, to find a way to protect as many as possible. Escape routes had been mapped in whispers, contingencies hidden in secret signals between him and Charlotte. But the weight of responsibility pressed down with a suffocating intensity. A single misstep could doom them all. Riley's shadow stretched over every decision, his threats unseen but felt in every tense conversation and forced smile. The terrain was easier now, rolling hills replacing the jagged, treacherous mountains. Yet the calm was deceptive. Josiah knew that danger was not always visible. Bandits, opportunistic traders, or even neighbors who saw the caravan as a prize could strike at any moment. And worse still, the true danger lay in the very people who trusted him, in the delicate web of hope he had spun, balancing lies and truth with surgical precision. At night, by the campfires, whispers floated through the group. Children asked about home, about schools, about farms and houses they would have. Adults exchanged cautious glances, sharing fears in hushed tones. Josiah moved among them, a steady hand on a trembling shoulder, a reassuring word here and there, all while suppressing the panic rising in his chest. He had to maintain the illusion of hope. He had to convince them that Kentucky was freedom, even if his own heart screamed otherwise. Charlotte stayed close to him, their quiet moments brief and precious. She sensed his torment, understood it without a word, and offered silent strength. "We will find a way," she whispered one night, her fingers entwined with his. Josiah nodded, drawing courage from her resolve, though he could not yet see the path forward clearly. Food was scarce, and every meal was a test of patience and fairness. Cornmeal, salted pork, and whatever game could be hunted or trapped were rationed carefully. Arguments flared occasionally over supplies, yet Josiah's calm authority prevented disaster. He became a master of small miracles, keeping spirits alive, ensuring no one was left behind, disguising exhaustion with a veneer of control. One morning, as frost coated the fields and the sun barely pierced the heavy clouds, a group of men approached him quietly. They had heard rumors, small pieces of conversation, and feared the worst. "Henson, are we truly safe? Are we being led to freedom, or to chains?" they asked, their voices tight with anxiety. Josiah met their eyes, seeing both fear and a desperate longing for truth. He chose his words carefully. "We are going to Kentucky," he said firmly. "The road is hard, but we will reach a place where we can work, live, and be together. Trust in me. Trust in yourselves." His voice carried conviction, even as his heart pounded with dread. He could not reveal Riley's plan, not yet, not until he had a way to protect them. The lie was a weapon and a shield, one he wielded with painful precision. The days passed, and Kentucky drew nearer. Hills became valleys, rivers crossed under careful guidance, and signs of civilization appeared, small settlements, farmhouses, smoke curling from chimneys. Every sign of life brought both relief and terror. Relief that they had not been attacked, terror that exposure could bring new dangers or alert Riley's agents. One afternoon, Josiah spotted a group of riders in the distance. Panic surged in his chest. Were they hostile, traitors, bandits, or worse, agents of Riley? He guided the caravan into the cover of the trees, whispering instructions to keep the wagons quiet and the people hidden. The riders passed without incident, yet the encounter left Josiah shaken. Every mile now demanded constant vigilance, every moment a negotiation with fate. By the time the first signs of fertile Kentucky fields appeared on the horizon, Josiah felt the strain in his body and soul. The journey had been merciless, testing every aspect of endurance, courage, and morality. Yet, despite exhaustion and fear, he could not allow despair to take hold. He had to maintain hope, not just for himself, but for the families relying on him. As the caravan entered the outskirts of Daviess County, Josiah began to enact the plan he and Charlotte had devised. Quietly, he identified sympathetic farmers and allies, places where they could rest without fear of being sold, routes that could offer concealment if needed. Every decision was a delicate balance, a chess game with lives as the stakes. That evening, he gathered the people around the fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. "We are almost there," he said. "We will find safety, a chance to live and be together. Hold on to each other. Trust in what we can build together." His words were measured, his tone steady, but inside, Josiah's heart raced. He prayed that his plans would succeed, that the deceit he carried would lead to salvation rather than catastrophe. Night fell, and the caravan rested, huddled together for warmth and protection. Josiah lay awake, staring at the dark sky, thinking of the lives in his hands. The burden of leadership, the weight of moral compromise, and the constant threat of betrayal pressed upon him like a suffocating shroud. Yet he also felt a spark, a quiet, stubborn flame of determination. He would not let Riley win. He would find a way to turn this journey into freedom. The dawn of the next day brought promise and danger alike. As they moved further into Kentucky, Josiah could see fields ready for cultivation, streams that would provide water, forests that could offer shelter. But he also knew that the promise of these lands was fragile, that danger lurked in the form of traders, debtors, and the merciless laws of slavery. Every decision had to be perfect, every step calculated with precision. Josiah Henson had led his people through mountains, rivers, and forests, surviving exhaustion, hunger, and fear. He had navigated impossible moral terrain, balancing the protection of his family against the welfare of dozens of others. Now, on the edge of a new land, the true test awaited. Could he transform this forced journey into salvation, or would the lies and deceit finally claim the lives he sought to preserve? The future was uncertain, the path treacherous, and the burden immense. But one truth remained clear: Josiah would fight with every ounce of courage and cunning he possessed. For his children, for Charlotte, and for the people who trusted him, he would not allow hope to die. The journey was far from over, and the ultimate confrontation with destiny was just ahead. The final miles to Kentucky would demand more than endurance, they would demand sacrifice, strategy, and unwavering resolve. Josiah Henson, once a man shaped by oppression, now faced the possibility of shaping freedom itself. If you want, I can continue and create Part 7 to Part 10, completing the full 10-part horror and historical story of Josiah Henson, each part 1,000 words, maintaining this gripping YouTube-style narrative. Do you want me to continue with that engaging hook? When the promise of safety is nothing more than a shadow, and every step forward could lead to betrayal, what would you do to protect those you love? Josiah Henson has led his people through mountains, rivers, and relentless fear. But in Kentucky, the true test begins. Survival is no longer enough. He must outwit the horrors that lurk ahead and fight for freedom before it is too late. Part 7. The rolling hills of Kentucky stretched before them, green and inviting yet hiding a tension that only Josiah could feel. The journey from Maryland had taken weeks longer than expected. Bodies were bruised, hearts weary, yet the caravan pressed onward, driven by the faint hope that promised land would offer refuge. But Josiah knew better than anyone that Riley's deceit could strike at any moment. Every morning, he woke before the others, the cold cutting through his thin clothing. He checked the wagons, the horses, the people, ensuring no illness or injury could slow them. The children, though spirited, struggled against fatigue and cold. He encouraged them, always aware that the smallest spark of hope could be extinguished if despair took hold. His careful optimism was a fragile shield against the crushing reality of betrayal. Charlotte remained at his side, silently supporting him, her quiet presence a tether to humanity in the chaos of their forced migration. Together, they whispered plans late at night. Escape, concealment, distraction, each idea weighed against its dangers. They could not confront Riley openly, he had too much power and too many resources. And yet doing nothing was no longer an option. Josiah had learned that to survive, he needed not only courage, but cunning beyond measure. The terrain tested them relentlessly. Streams swelled with winter melt, forcing wagons to navigate slippery banks. Forests were dense, hiding potential threats but also offering shelter. Josiah had to choose paths carefully. One wrong turn could lead to injury, exposure, or capture. Each decision carried the weight of lives, not just his own, and the pressure pressed on him like a physical force. At one of their stops, Josiah noticed a man watching from a distance, a stranger whose eyes lingered too long. Fear tightened his chest. Could this be a traitor? A bounty hunter sent by Riley to reclaim the enslaved people? He quietly instructed some of the men to take positions near the woods, ready to warn him of any approach. The stranger eventually moved on, but the encounter left a lingering tension in the camp. Trust was a fragile commodity, and Josiah could afford no mistakes. Supplies were dwindling. Food had been rationed carefully, yet some were weak, others sick. The winter cold made every morsel of sustenance precious. Josiah oversaw the distribution, ensuring fairness while maintaining morale. He told stories by the fires at night, tales of resilience and survival, carefully shaping a sense of hope while masking the truth of Riley's betrayal. Yet hope was fragile, and the reality of their situation began to weigh heavily on the adults. Murmurs spread among the group. Questions about the route, suspicions about Riley's intentions, doubts about Henson's leadership. Josiah listened quietly, never revealing his knowledge of the master's true plan. He had to keep them moving, keep them believing, all while preparing for the worst. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and long shadows stretched across the fields, Charlotte whispered urgently to him. "There is a farm ahead, not far from the road. The family there is known to be kind. Perhaps we can secure shelter, safety for the night, and gather information about the local traders." Josiah nodded, recognizing the opportunity to both rest his people and gain intelligence. Every moment was a chance to tip the balance toward survival. The farm proved welcoming, a modest homestead with smoke rising from the chimney and the faint sound of a child crying. The owners, a white couple, eyed the caravan warily, but after Josiah explained their situation in carefully chosen words, they offered food, firewood, and a place to rest. The relief was palpable. For the first time in days, the people could sit without fear of immediate danger. Yet Josiah could not rest. He moved through the shadows, speaking with the couple quietly, gauging the risk of traders in the area. They mentioned rumors of a slave trader passing through nearby towns, offering high prices for families like those in Josiah's caravan. The words hit him like a hammer. Riley's plan was already in motion, and they were dangerously close to its execution. He had to act, and soon. Josiah gathered Charlotte and a few trusted men, devising a plan to scatter the group into smaller units, taking alternate routes once they left the safety of the farm. The idea was to reduce the risk of capture, to make it harder for traders to target large numbers at once. Each unit would carry provisions, maps, and instructions to rendezvous later, ideally in areas less accessible to bounty hunters. The plan was risky, but the cost of inaction was far worse. The next morning, the caravan resumed its journey, the people unaware of the imminent danger looming ahead. Josiah rode at the front, his gaze sweeping the hills, alert for any sign of trouble. He signaled to the others when to break into smaller groups, his commands clear and deliberate. The tension was palpable, the fear barely contained, yet the caravan moved with cautious precision. As they crossed a river, Josiah noticed a shadow in the tree line, a group of men armed with rifles, likely traitors, tipped off to their presence. Panic surged through him, but he masked it with calm authority. He directed the smaller groups to scatter, taking different paths through the woods and fields. The sound of hoofs and shouts echoed in the valley, but his planning worked. The traitors could not capture everyone at once. In the aftermath, as the group regrouped at a prearranged clearing, Josiah counted heads, relieved to find no one missing. Yet the threat remained. The traitors would not give up easily, and Riley's ultimate betrayal still hung over them like a storm cloud. Every step forward required vigilance, cunning, and courage. That night, Josiah sat by the fire, Charlotte beside him, reflecting on the path ahead. They had survived treacherous terrain, hunger, cold, and the constant threat of capture. But the true test was still to come. The fertile lands of Kentucky were near, but freedom was not guaranteed. Every decision he had made, every lie he had told, had been a calculated gamble to save as many lives as possible. Josiah realized that the journey had transformed him. The man who had once been a trusted overseer, forced to punish his own people, had become a leader, protector, and strategist. He had carried the weight of others' lives and moral compromises with a strength few could imagine. Yet he knew that the ultimate challenge awaited. As the first light of dawn broke over the hills, Josiah rose, his resolve hardened. The Kentucky frontier stretched before him, filled with danger, promise, and uncertainty. He would need every ounce of courage, wisdom, and determination to protect his people, to outwit Riley's schemes, and to turn a forced journey into a chance for freedom. The road ahead was treacherous, the stakes unimaginable, but Josiah Henson had learned one unshakable truth: hope was a weapon, and with careful planning, it could carry them through even the darkest of storms. If you want, I can continue with Part 8 to Part 10, completing the full 10-part horror and historical series, keeping it gripping and suitable for American YouTube audiences. Do you want me to continue with the next parts? Engaging hook. When betrayal lies hidden beneath promises, and freedom seems just beyond reach, how far would a man go to save his people? Josiah Henson has led his people through danger, deception, and despair. Now, as the Kentucky frontier looms ahead, the true trial begins. Every choice could mean life or death, and the shadows of the past threaten to consume them all. Part 8. The morning air was sharp and bitter as Josiah Henson surveyed the rolling hills ahead. Kentucky stretched before them, promising fertile land and a new beginning, yet each slope and valley seemed to conceal threats as real as the winter chill. His people, exhausted from the weeks of travel, followed his lead with weary determination. The children clutched their mothers, adults trudged through mud and frost, all trusting the man who carried not just their safety, but their fragile hope. Josiah's mind, however, was far from rested. The letter he had discovered in Maryland remained a heavy weight upon his conscience. Riley's plan to sell the majority of the enslaved people was not a distant threat anymore, it was imminent. The closer they came to their destination, the greater the danger. The promise of Kentucky was a mirage, and Josiah had to act with cunning and speed. He met quietly with Charlotte and a few trusted allies one night. By the dim light of a fire, they laid out maps, tracing the route through rivers, forests, and sparsely settled farms. The plan was simple in theory but fraught with risk. Scatter the groups once near Kentucky, avoid the main roads, and use sympathetic neighbors as temporary safe havens. Every decision was a life or death gamble, and Josiah felt the crushing weight of responsibility. The days grew colder as they neared the frontier. Frost coated the fields, and rivers ran faster with melting snow. Food was scarce, and each ration was carefully measured. Josiah knew that exhaustion could break morale faster than any threat from outside. He maintained order with quiet authority, speaking gently to the children, encouraging the adults, and silently reminding them to trust in the journey. Yet the burden of leadership weighed heavily. Josiah was haunted by the memories of the punishments he had administered under Riley's orders. Each whip stroke had carved guilt into his soul, and now, as he maneuvered to save as many as possible, the shadow of those acts lingered. He questioned himself constantly. Could he truly protect everyone, or would some lives be sacrificed no matter his effort? One afternoon, as they crested a hill, Josiah spotted movement in the distance. A group of riders approached, their intentions unclear. Panic gripped him, but years of experience forced calm. He signaled the group to take cover in the woods and behind rocks. The riders drew closer, rifles glinting in the weak sunlight. Josiah's heart pounded as he considered their options. The men turned out to be local farmers, curious about the caravan but not hostile. Their questions were cautious, their eyes measuring. Josiah answered with calculated honesty, speaking of a long journey and a search for fertile land, carefully avoiding the truth of Riley's betrayal. The farmers eventually moved on, but the encounter reminded Josiah that danger could arise from anywhere, even from those who appeared neutral. That evening, as the caravan rested, whispers grew louder among the adults. Questions about Riley, about Kentucky, about the future circulated like sparks in dry grass. Josiah listened carefully, choosing his words to reassure without revealing the peril he knew awaited them. Trust was fragile, and he had to maintain it at all costs. A single misstep could unravel the delicate web of hope he had spun. Charlotte sensed his inner turmoil and offered what comfort she could. Their private moments were brief but grounding, a reminder of what he was fighting for. "We will make it," she said quietly, her hand resting on his arm. Josiah drew strength from her resolve, though he could not shake the fear that their journey might end in tragedy. The terrain became more treacherous as they approached the Kentucky rivers. Crossing was slow and dangerous, with icy waters threatening to sweep away wagons and livestock. Josiah organized the effort with precision, ensuring that each group crossed safely while maintaining order. The physical challenges were immense, but the psychological burden weighed even heavier. Every decision had consequences that could ripple through the lives of the caravan. One night, as they camped near a dense forest, Josiah held a council with his closest allies. They discussed routes, safe houses, and signals to communicate if the caravan were separated. Every plan was layered with contingency, yet Josiah knew that the unexpected could strike at any moment. They would need courage, cunning, and unwavering resolve to survive the final stretch. As they moved deeper into Kentucky, signs of civilization appeared. Small settlements and farms dotted the landscape, some welcoming, others indifferent or suspicious. Josiah had to balance the need for rest and supplies with the risk of exposure. The promise of freedom was tantalizingly close, yet danger lurked in every shadow. One morning, Josiah noticed a distant column of smoke, unusual for the area. He approached cautiously and discovered a group of traders. Heart pounding, he led the caravan along a hidden path through the forest, avoiding the main roads and keeping his people silent. The traders passed without incident, but the encounter reinforced the constant peril that shadowed their journey. Despite exhaustion, hunger, and fear, Josiah remained resolute. He encouraged his people, shared stories by the fire, and reinforced the fragile hope that had carried them across mountains and rivers. He knew that despair could spread faster than frostbite or hunger, and he worked tirelessly to keep morale intact. As the days passed, Kentucky's fertile fields became more evident. Streams teemed with fish, forests offered shelter, and pastures seemed ready for planting. The land promised new beginnings, but Josiah knew that freedom was not guaranteed. Riley's betrayal still loomed, and the ultimate test of cunning and courage was yet to come. Josiah's leadership had transformed him. The man who once enforced cruel orders for survival had become a strategist, protector, and guide. He carried not just the lives of his family but the hopes of dozens of others. The burden was immense, but it had also forged a resolve that would not easily break. As night fell over the Kentucky hills, Josiah watched the stars, tracing constellations that had guided travelers for centuries. He thought of Maryland, of Riley, and of the journey that had brought them here. The path ahead was uncertain, the stakes higher than ever, but one truth remained: he would fight with every ounce of courage and cunning to secure freedom for his people. The final miles to safety were ahead, and Josiah knew that every decision, every calculated risk, could mean the difference between life and death. The shadow of betrayal was long, but his determination burned brighter. The frontier was unforgiving, yet it was also their only chance. The ultimate confrontation with destiny was near, and Josiah Henson was ready to meet it head-on. If you want, I can continue with Part 9 and Part 10, completing the 10-part horror and historic story series for YouTube, keeping it gripping, suspenseful, and easy to follow for an American audience. Do you want me to continue with the final parts? Engaging hook. When the shadows of betrayal grow long, and freedom seems just out of reach, the final test begins. Josiah Henson has led his people through danger, deception, and despair. Now, on the edge of the Kentucky frontier, every choice could mean life or death. The past and the present collide, and the ultimate confrontation with destiny is at hand. Part 9. The Kentucky sun rose cold and pale, washing the rolling hills in muted light. The journey from Maryland had pushed every man, woman, and child to their limits. Fatigue-lined faces, weary legs dragged through the frost-laden fields, and hope was a fragile flame flickering against the relentless wind. Josiah Henson rode at the front, his eyes scanning the horizon, alert for the smallest signs of danger. The last few weeks had been grueling. Hidden paths through dense forests, rivers too wide to cross without risk, and treacherous weather had tested the limits of endurance. Yet the most dangerous obstacles were not natural, they were human. The memory of Riley's betrayal, the fear of traitors, and the constant possibility of capture weighed heavily on Josiah. Every glance he cast, every decision he made, was a careful balance between survival and the hope of freedom. That morning, he gathered Charlotte and the group of trusted allies. "We are close," he said quietly, his voice steady but low. "The settlements ahead offer both risk and opportunity. We must be cautious, and we must stay united. Split up only when absolutely necessary, and always know where the others are." The plan was to move through the outskirts of small towns, avoiding the main roads where traders and bounty hunters might watch. Every settlement was a gamble. Some offered food and shelter, others suspicion and danger. Josiah understood that their survival depended not only on physical endurance but on careful judgment and the ability to read human intent. As they traveled, Josiah noticed an unusual stillness in the air. Birds were silent, the wind barely stirred the branches. It was a quiet that carried a sense of foreboding, the kind that made every nerve tingle with caution. He signaled the group to halt and dismount, instructing the men to take positions around the wagons. The children huddled close, sensing the tension without understanding it. Through the mist, a group of men appeared on horseback. Rifles slung across their shoulders, eyes sharp and calculating. Traitors, or worse, bounty hunters. Josiah's heart clenched. The people ahead were unarmed, vulnerable, and entirely at the mercy of the approaching men. He forced calm over his rising panic, thinking quickly. He rode forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Good morning," he called out, his voice even and controlled. "We are travelers seeking shelter and food. We mean no harm." The leader of the men narrowed his eyes. "Where are you headed?" he demanded. "And who owns these people?" Josiah's mind raced. He could not reveal Riley's plan, not yet. Any hint of deceit could provoke violence. "We are moving west, to Kentucky," he replied carefully. "These are my family and my people. We seek work, land, and safety from the storms." The men exchanged glances, suspicion in their eyes. Josiah added, "We can pay for food or labor. We only ask for guidance and kindness." After tense moments, the men nodded, apparently satisfied for the moment, and rode on. The relief was palpable but fleeting. Every encounter, every glance from strangers, reminded Josiah of the fragility of their situation. The journey was nearing its end, yet the danger had never been more real. That evening, the group camped near a river. Water flowed swiftly, a cold reminder of both life and threat. Josiah and Charlotte huddled with a few trusted men, reviewing the plan for the final stretch. "We have almost reached the safe zone," he whispered, tracing the path to a network of sympathetic farmers who could hide them if needed. "We move carefully, avoid main routes, and stay ready. Anything can happen in the next few days." The children slept fitfully, dreams haunted by the memories of the journey. Josiah watched them, feeling the weight of every decision he had made. The memory of the whip, the choices forced upon him under Riley's orders, and the constant fear of betrayal gnawed at his soul. Yet he knew there was no turning back. They were close to freedom, and he would not allow anything to destroy the hope that had carried them this far. The next morning, the group moved in smaller units, taking parallel paths through the forest. Josiah led the largest group, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick undergrowth. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch, made him tense, ready for confrontation. The adults followed his example, keeping their children quiet, eyes alert to danger. By midday, signs of civilization appeared, a small homestead tucked between trees, smoke curling from a chimney. Josiah approached cautiously, assessing the risk. The family that lived there greeted them with wary curiosity. Josiah explained their situation carefully, emphasizing the need for shelter and guidance without revealing the truth about Riley. The family offered food, warmth, and temporary refuge. Inside the homestead, Josiah gathered the adults and whispered the next part of the plan. "We rest here tonight, and then at dawn we continue west. The safe houses are close, and once we reach them, we can regroup and ensure no one is left behind. We are nearly free, but we must stay vigilant." Sleep came in short, uneasy bursts. The memories of past cruelties, the knowledge of Riley's betrayal, and the fear of capture haunted every moment. Josiah felt the weight of responsibility pressing down with relentless force. He could not fail. Every life in the caravan depended on his choices, and the line between survival and disaster was razor thin. At first light, the caravan resumed its journey. The forest gave way to open fields, streams, and hills. Josiah kept the group together, scanning for any sign of danger. Traders, bounty hunters, or even suspicious neighbors could strike at any moment. The closer they came to safety, the more desperate Riley's agents would be to claim their prize. In the distance, Josiah spotted a column of smoke rising above the treetops. He motioned for silence, moving the group off the main path into a small hollow. From this hidden vantage point, they watched the source, a group of traders moving slowly through the area. Josiah's heart pounded, but he remained calm, guiding the group through a narrow path that kept them unseen. The threat passed, but the encounter left a lingering unease. Josiah realized that freedom was not simply reaching a physical location, it was navigating the endless dangers, anticipating betrayal, and maintaining hope against impossible odds. The psychological weight of leadership was immense, yet he bore it with determination and skill. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the caravan finally caught sight of a network of farms where the safe houses awaited. Relief and cautious hope mingled in the air. Josiah knew that even now, danger was not gone, yet the end of their long, treacherous journey was in sight. The final test of courage, cunning, and resilience awaited. Josiah dismounted, looking over the faces of the people he had led. Each one had endured exhaustion, fear, and the constant threat of death. Yet they had survived, and under his guidance, they would take the next step toward freedom. He felt a deep, unspoken bond with them, a connection forged in shared suffering and unwavering hope. The Kentucky frontier promised more than fertile fields. It offered the chance for autonomy, safety, and dignity. Josiah Henson knew that the battle was far from over, but he also knew one undeniable truth: hope, carefully nurtured and fiercely protected, could guide them through even the darkest nights. The journey was almost complete, and the shadows of betrayal still lingered. But Josiah had learned to face fear, manipulate circumstances, and protect those he loved with unwavering resolve. Freedom was within reach, and the final confrontation with Riley's deceit was only a matter of time. I can now create Part 10, the thrilling and conclusive finale of this 10-part horror and historic series, bringing Josiah Henson's journey to its ultimate resolution for your American YouTube audience. Do you want me to create Part 10 next? Engaging hook. The shadows of betrayal have loomed for years. The journey has tested courage, loyalty, and the very limits of the human spirit. Now, at last, Josiah Henson and his people face the final trial. Freedom hangs in the balance, but the past will not easily release its grip. This is the moment when choices, sacrifices, and courage collide in a life or death reckoning. Part 10 Final Part. The Kentucky morning was crisp, the air filled with the scent of pine and fresh earth. Josiah Henson stood at the edge of a hill, looking down at the small network of farms that had been promised as safe havens. Relief rippled through him, yet his heart remained heavy. He knew Riley's betrayal still shadowed them. The promise of Kentucky was real, but the threat of capture or separation lingered like a ghost. The people had grown quiet during the final leg of their journey. Children clung to parents, adults moved with careful deliberation, and the weary faces reflected a fragile hope that had been built over months of hardship. Josiah's eyes swept over them, silently taking note of every weary step, every anxious glance. Their survival depended on his vigilance, and there was no room for error. He called the trusted group together. "We are almost there," he said quietly. "These farms offer safety, but we must remain cautious. Any signs of danger, and we move quickly. No one gets left behind. Not a single person." Charlotte held his hand, her grip firm. "We've made it this far," she said softly. "We can make it the rest of the way." Her words steadied him, but he knew the trials were not yet over. As they approached the cluster of homesteads, Josiah noticed the subtle signs of danger. Smoke rising not from chimneys but from distant fires, riders moving unnaturally in the distance, and a tension in the air that spoke of watchers. His heart pounded, yet he masked his fear, showing calm authority to maintain trust among the people. The final approach required careful strategy. Josiah led the caravan along hidden paths, guiding wagons through forests and over streams while keeping an ever-watchful eye on the terrain. The forest seemed alive with whispers, the wind carrying distant sounds that could signal either help or threat. Every decision could tip the balance between freedom and disaster. Suddenly, a rider appeared on a ridge, silhouetted against the morning sun. Instinctively, Josiah called for silence, signaling the group to take cover. His pulse raced as the rider drew closer. Relief came when the figure turned out to be a local farmer, wary but harmless. The encounter reinforced the lesson that danger could appear anywhere, yet careful observation and calm judgment could save lives. Night fell, and the group camped near one of the safe farms. Inside the farmhouse, Josiah gathered the adults in hushed tones. "Tomorrow we reach the last stretch," he whispered. "We move as one, stay alert, and remember why we've endured everything. Our freedom is almost here, but we must be vigilant to claim it." Sleep came fitfully. Josiah's mind was haunted by memories of the past, the whip, the agonizing choices he had made under Riley's orders, and the burden of guiding the caravan through peril. Every sound in the night made him tense, every shadow a potential threat. Yet he drew strength from the courage and resilience of those he led. Dawn arrived with a cold, clear light. Josiah roused the caravan, the final miles stretching ahead. The terrain grew rugged, with rivers to ford and hills to climb, yet each step brought them closer to safety. Josiah's careful planning and unwavering vigilance guided them steadily forward. The final obstacle came in the form of a wide river, swollen from recent rains. Crossing it was dangerous. The current could sweep away wagons and livestock, and any misstep could mean death. Josiah organized the effort with precision, instructing the adults to stabilize the wagons while helping children and the elderly across. The hours were tense, but the careful coordination paid off, and every member of the caravan reached the far bank safely. Exhausted but determined, Josiah pressed onward. In the distance, the safe farms promised shelter, warmth, and freedom. Yet he knew the psychological battle was not over. Many of the adults still bore the scars of past punishments, the weight of fear, and the trauma of months on the road. Josiah reminded them that hope was a choice, a force that could carry them through the darkest moments if they clung to it together. Finally, as the sun reached its peak, the caravan arrived at the network of safe farms. Relief swept through the group, mingled with disbelief. Children laughed for the first time in weeks, parents embraced, and the adults who had survived the trials of the journey allowed themselves a moment of reprieve. Josiah watched, feeling a complex mix of joy, exhaustion, and lingering guilt. He knew the battle for freedom was not yet over. They were safe from immediate threats, but rebuilding their lives would require courage, resilience, and the ability to navigate a world that had often treated them as less than human. Yet for the first time in years, there was tangible hope, a chance to live with dignity, to nurture their children, and to create a future beyond fear. In that moment, Josiah understood the full weight of his journey. He had carried the burden of impossible choices, walked the razor's edge between survival and betrayal, and endured the torment of a conscience tested by cruelty and deception. Yet through it all, he had led his people to safety, preserving as many lives as possible while maintaining the fragile bonds of trust. The final act of their journey was a triumph not only of strategy but of human resilience. Josiah Henson had faced the darkest shadows of his world, and though scars remained, both physical and emotional, he had guided his people toward light. The journey had tested courage, morality, and endurance, and it had forged a legacy of leadership under unimaginable pressure. As the group settled into the farms, Josiah took a moment to speak. "We have survived, and we will continue to survive. The path ahead will not be easy, but we now have the chance to live free, to care for our children, and to honor those who came before us. Never forget the courage you have shown, and never let the shadows of the past define you." The people listened, understanding the depth of his words. They had endured hunger, fear, and betrayal. They had survived the cruelty of masters, the peril of the journey, and the constant threat of separation. Now, together, they faced the possibility of a future forged from resilience, unity, and hope. Josiah's eyes met Charlotte's, and in her gaze, he found the affirmation of their shared struggle. The road ahead was long, but it was theirs to shape. He had carried the burden of impossible choices, yet in guiding them through darkness, he had preserved the most vital light, their chance at freedom. The Kentucky sun set on the horizon, painting the hills in gold and shadow. The journey had ended, but the story of survival, courage, and moral endurance would echo through generations. Josiah Henson, once bound by chains and impossible choices, had emerged as a guide, protector, and symbol of resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. If you found Josiah Henson's journey gripping, hit subscribe to Liturgy of Fear for more chilling and historic tales. Share this video with someone who loves stories of courage against all odds, and leave a comment telling us what you would do in Josiah's impossible situation. Your engagement helps uncover more dark corners of history.